Welcome to For Good Measure, an interview series celebrating diverse composers and other creative artists. I'm Nanette McGuinness, Artistic Executive Director of Ensemble for these times. In this week's episode, we continue our Da Capo Conversations, a mini-series where we'll be giving familiar segments a topical twist. Today we revisit Nina Shekhar's and Carla Lucero's advice for young or emerging composers and artists. Here's what Nina Shekhar had to say.
Yeah, so in terms of advice, there's many ways I could go with this. I think ultimately, I think the biggest advice for anybody is that, their voice matters and that they shouldn't be afraid to say what they want to say, how they want to say it, regardless of what anybody else thinks or other constraints that are put on them. And I think that this especially goes for, like young women or non-binary artists, composers of color. I think it's so often like marginalized identities tend to be constrained in a way that it's like we're so afraid of taking up space, especially like young women. I think like it's so we're conditioned, by society to kind of take as little space as possible. And
yeah.
I think that it's been a real like eye-opening journey for me. I think I'm still a young woman and kind of feeling the last few years like just kind of how I've been thinking about that idea of taking up space, how I engaged with my own voice and how I speak up, and I think also related to this is, a lot of Asian identity, like culturally, we're taught to like keep your head down, be quiet, don't disturb it, just like move ahead, like don't bother with like, kind of trying to dismantle anything. You're just kind of keep your head down. And I think both of that, I think it's been really interesting as I move through the field and kind of counter a lot of fears I had about speaking up and taking up space. But then also I think related to that is I think men are conditioned that they should take up as much space as possible, but then they think everybody else should too, or like that's like we should be like them, when actually I think maybe maybe it's a good thing that we don't take up as much space because we have a sense of empathy. Like I actually think like I critique that notion of like everybody should be as loud as possible, because I don't think that's true. I think that really we should be listening to each other a lot more. We should be making space for others, to have their own platform. And I think that that's something that I think about for younger artists, as we move through the field. It's really scary to like, put yourself out there, and especially in a time where it's like identity is so policed or so like
Fraught.
fraught, I would say. And it's just so like scary right now to be honest about your own experiences and feel like you can say what you want to say without somebody else censoring it or changing your honesty in what you want to say. So I think that ideally I would think that that's the most important thing for young artists, for them to have that, be able to move through the field and be able to create the work that they want to make without having fear of being censored in some way. And I'm saying this because I had a few experiences, especially like after 2020. I think with everything going on socially around that time, it's like a lot of organizations suddenly felt like they were on like hot coals and were like really afraid of everything, and also not really understanding how to deal with change and actually like meaningful change. Like I think there was a lot of this kind of like putting a band-aid on things but not actually wanting to change things. And like, yeah, in 2021, I had a couple pieces censored, for very
No.
different reasons. Yeah, and it really affected me, and I
What
think that
happened?
contributed. There were just certain instances where it's like one piece, that Bach piece actually was somebody programmed it. It was already an existing piece. It wasn't like it was a commission. And somebody thought it was too political. That like, how dare
Oh my God.
I take apart Bach? It was like actually a real issue for somebody. And then on the other side of things, it was like a piece where I wrote something about immigrant identity, and it
Hmm.
had a lot of double meanings, and the ensemble did not understand any of those double meanings and thought that it was like this really vanilla, like they didn't understand that there was like this kind of sense of
Subtext.
yeah, subtext, and they thought it was not, essentially like not a traumatized piece enough. So like it's like kind of the opposite things that have happened, and I think it contributed to some of the burnout that I felt in after that year. And I
Sure.
think, since then I've kind of been really thinking about like what is it that I want to say, and how can I preserve that space for myself where I can say what I want to say, and make sure that I don't feel like I'm stifling my voice in any way. And that, like, ideally what we want is a field where everybody has the agency, has the platform to speak their own truth. And um yeah, I've been trying to make sure that I can do that and feel like I have that, and I do feel like I have that now. And I think
Good.
I just always empathize, with other young artists who are just starting, and are really afraid of their next paycheck, of like, how like building their career, building a network, and being so afraid of being censored in some way. Like I think that it's really important to me that they feel like they have that space where they can be themselves.
Yeah, I think that makes sense, especially for young women in all cultures, because we get we get very far by figuring out how to get approval, right? And how to get that A plus or whatever. But there comes a point where, as an artist, if all you're doing is trying to get approval, you are censoring yourself and you aren't hearing your own voice. And if you don't hear your own voice, you can't authentically share it with other people, and they will sense that you aren't in some way, right?
Right, exactly. Yeah, it's the sense of needing approval is it's so interesting, because I think about that in many aspects of my personal life, and many aspects of my life. But I think in a career sense, also, it's like we're constantly looking for, a good review, for some sort of well-known institution to program us or commission us, like approval from all of these other entities, getting into a degree program, like approval from like a academia, like all of these things. Um, and yeah, it's like, wait, what is it that we actually want to do? Like, what is it that we want to say? And I think it's tough to kind of opt out of that like constant need for approval by these other entities. But I think it's really important that it's almost like building your own network of approval, like a different, like opting out from these structures, that you can have your own space to do what you want to do, or a different community of people who have the same values as you, and like share your goals, which might be different than like these other entities' goals. So it's a challenging thing to kind of mediate, but ultimately I think that's really important.
I agree. Totally agree. Here's what Carla Lucero had to say.
I would say, yeah, advice in general is to seek out your own community and write authentically, write from the heart, because that is where the fire in your heart is going to give you the passion that you need
Mm-hmm.
to succeed. I think that there are a lot of people who are trying to chase something. like
Mhm.
chase a style of music or be the next big thing or the new thing or whatever it is. Um, that, I mean, maybe that's authentic to some people, but I think that if you're writing from a place of authenticity in terms of yourself,
Mhm.
that you will succeed.
Yeah, those are good pieces of advice. And finding your community is something that keeps coming up in these chats as well. Both of those things. Thank you for listening to For Good Measures Da Capo Conversations, and a special thank you to our guests for joining us today. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe to our podcast by clicking on the subscribe button and support us by sharing it with your friends, posting about it on social media, and leaving us a rating and a review. To learn more about E4TT, our concert season online and in the Bay Area, or to make a tax-deductible donation, please visit us at www.e4tt.org. This podcast is made possible by grants from the California Arts Council, the San Francisco Arts Commission, Grants for the Arts, and generous donors like you. For Good Measures produced by Nanette McGuinness and Ensemble for These Times and designed by Brennan Stokes, with special thanks to co-producer and audio engineer Stephanie M. Neumann. Remember to keep supporting equity in the arts and tune in next week for Good Measure.